like to try to attack the defense before it gets set. And if that's the case, your guys have to be able to understand how to play at that type of pace or that type of flow without guidance or direction from the coach during the course of the game. You know, now dead ball situations, timeouts, you can talk to your team about certain things, but they got to be able to play the game offensively within some sort of system so they all understand where they need to go and what they need to do. They need to be able to attack the team so they're not always going against a set defense. That's what flow to me means.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Kings Court podcast presented to you by RateCrushers.com. I'm your host, Vince Miracle, and joining me today, it's been 5 years since I've had this man on the show, and I'm super excited to have him on. It's going to be Coach Nick of BBall Breakdown. Coach, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it again. Be back.
Man, it's been so long. So much has changed since. I mean, Coach, I think when I first had you on the show, you were at right around, I think, 20,000 subscribers, something like that. What's wow. BBall Breakdown at now, 5 years later?
I mean, it's 850,000 somewhere around here on YouTube.
That's what I'm saying. Over the 5 years, it's just exploded. You've been just making such creative content for such a long time. I was talking to a buddy of mine, Leo Bias, who runs Cowbell Kingdom, prior to doing this show with you. And, you know, him and I said that you were like the pioneer of going over X's and O's over, you know, the basketball and the NBA and then bringing players on. So before we even get into it, I want to just give you a round of applause for just the work that you put in, man. It's been a lot of fun watching your content over the last few years.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I was one of the pioneers. There's a couple of us out there in the beginning, but no one else has lasted this long. For maybe I'm crazier than they are. I don't know.
Now you have so many people that are wanting to join on in and do it. I mean, you have Lakers film room. We now have a Sac Kings film room. A lot of guys, and shouting out to great content out there to those Twitter followers out there. It's just a lot of fun. And again, I give you a big round of applause for the work that you've done, man. It's been great stuff. But Coach Nick from BBall Breakdown is joining us here on the shows. We're going to be talking about head coach Mike Brown's offensive and defensive sets, and, you know, looking to the future and possibly seeing if Mike Brown could potentially break the 16-year drought that the Sacramento Kings have been in out of the playoffs. But before we jump into all that, Coach, let me ask you this. You've seen the moves that the Kings have made, from Luke Walton to the interim head coaches, to all the switches that they made, and now adding in actual players that are surrounded by Domantas, Sabonis, and Fox that make sense. What have been your overall thoughts of these moves by the Kings this offseason?
Well, I thought it was funny because I guess they keep trying to recreate the Warriors' success that's, you know, just down the road from them. First, they hired Luke Walton. Now they're taking Mike Brown, another assistant from the Steve Kerr's staff. It didn't work out well at all for Luke Walton, and certainly you can argue that a lot of it had to do with personnel. Before the trade deadline, having gone through some clips and looking at what they were doing up until that point, I would have told you there's absolutely no way they were going to be able to get anything remotely resembling what the Warriors do on offense with the team that they had. Without question, it was they're they don't pass the ball hardly at all comparatively to the Warriors or the rest of the league. Potential assists numbers are very low as well for them. A lot of stagnancy, a lot of just sort of dribbling in place. And so my first impression was, you know, like De'Aaron Fox is not that guy. Like that's the guy they need to kind of figure out how to maybe move on from if they really want to try and recreate what the Warriors do, which certainly has yielded a ton of success in the last several years, and, you know, interest and fan, energy, and harkens back to what they had back in the day with Vlade and Chris Webber and Doug Christie and all those guys. So, Rick Adelman, and certainly I would be loath to not point out Yoda, Pete Carrill, who's on that staff, who helped them design that offense. So those are my concerns going at that point before I kind of finished, wrapping my head around exactly what they've done since then.
Yeah. So I mean, let's jump back into the past a little bit, right? The biggest move the Kings have made before this offseason was trading Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis, and we got to see a lot of that pick and roll action. Arguably, the best pick and roll away from Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton in the league was Fox and Sabonis. What do you make of that pairing so far, as what we've seen from them?
Well, it's a totally different thing from comparing anything that they did before February, whatever the trade deadline was, till after that. And I mean, here's the biggest thing I want. Let's focus on Sabonis a little bit before we get to the pairing, because as soon as he gets there, and as soon as he starts playing the five, and they start playing, they get five out. They had no spacing before then with guys like either Rashawn Holmes playing or Damian Jones. They didn't, even with only one big, they still didn't have good spacing at all. All of a sudden, when Sabonis comes in, they're playing him off the high post, spreading the floor. It opened up everything for everybody. So one guy who really caught my eye is a guy like Davion Mitchell, who didn't shoot so well for the whole season, didn't even shoot that much better when Sabonis gets there, but he did shoot better from three from there. And all I could tell you is that there's something going on with those two on offense. With the master of the handoff that Sabonis is doing that, which is all the Warriors kind of things that they love to do as well. This is big. Sabonis was a really, really, really big addition for them if that's what they want to do with their offense. Now, when you start talking about De'Aaron Fox, all of a sudden when Sabonis is out there, he's bringing the ball up a little bit more. And De'Aaron Fox is coming off of ball screens, and he's setting screens off, on the weak side. This is like I didn't see any of that before that. Right. And now he's cutting backdoor on the baseline, and Sabonis is hitting him for layups, or he's giving him handoffs to get into the lane. Like, these are the things we did not see at all. And if Mike Brown can capture some of that in the bottle, then you're going to see, a much better offense. And we'll get into the other guys they added too. And you'll probably see a lot more of this 5-out thing, which is the only interesting thing with like Rashawn Holmes, is how are they going to fit him in and be able to maintain that when he doesn't provide spacing. But off the bench, that might be okay for them because he'll go against second units.
Yeah, so let's start talking about those other guys, right? I think the biggest thing, after we saw Sabonis come over, we actually saw something that made sense with the pairing of Fox and Sabonis, a pick and roll game that was almost unstoppable. The thing that was missing, though, is both those guys like to operate inside the three-point line. So spacing was always going to be a big factor. And what did the Kings do? They addressed that automatically by going out day one of free agency and signing Malik Monk. Before that, in the draft with the number 4 pick, they draft Keegan Murray, and then going to make a big trade and a home run trade, I believe, and acquiring Kevin Huerter. Those moves right there, I think, move them in the right direction of saying, okay, this is a system that is in place. But when you saw those moves, were you saying, okay, now I understand what they're doing? Or are you still looking at this roster currently constructed and saying, there's still maybe a piece that's missing, but those additions were nice?
Well, I mean, the West is brutal. They're not really going to compete, I don't think, for the upper 6 spots of the West anyway. I'd be surprised. But they should be really fun to watch. Yeah. Obviously, defensively, which we haven't even addressed yet, is their biggest issue by far, even though the offense, because I think with what they did without Mike Brown saying anything about the offense, he could just roll the ball out there. They'll be better on offense, regardless because of who they have and the personnel around it. But it's the defensive things they're going to have to really shore up. But they really want to get into the playoffs and be competitive there. But it certainly is a good direction. And then, if you want to consider the last 10 years or so where they really didn't know what they were doing for a lot of that. And then roster construction, hires, the whole thing. They have a lot of work to do to dispel whatever there's a cloud over the franchise, unfortunately, and it doesn't seem like they can get anything right, even in their best tries. So this, though, it seems to be a movement. Obviously, a guy like Halliburton, I think he's going to be really good. I hope it was tough for them to part with him, but in order to bring a guy like Sabonis in, who has been an all-star and can give them that kind of juice and that kind of change in their offensive philosophy, I think it'll ultimately be a good trade for them.
So I'm bringing up Keegan Murray here, and this is going to be a nice transition as we go into looking at the offensive sets that I believe Mike Brown is going to bring to Sacramento. But we saw the Kings draft Keegan Murray at the number 4 pick. There was a lot of, we liked it, but did the Kings miss out on getting a guy like Jaden Ivey? But then Keegan Murray comes out in Las Vegas, wins the Summer League MVP in Vegas, and was tremendous in the California Classic. What has been your thoughts of Keegan Murray so far in the early NBA showing that we've seen.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to do a deep dive and really go through his game much after I did a thing on the draft. But I love guys that have size, like who are 6'8", 6'9", who can spread the floor and shoot, and who have a lot of athletic ability. So, this guy fits right into that same, category. Not as much as like the ball handling creation, but like that size is really important. You got to have guys who can do that, and then they can play some defense on both sides. So this is it should be a great addition for them. And it was great to see him do so well in summer league, because it doesn't really mean anything per se, but I would be hard pressed to find a guy who did that well in summer league and then was like never did anything in the NBA at all. So I'm thinking that that's a really promising start. And a good pick. That's a solid pick. It was kind of an interesting draft. It was probably a bunch of guys who were sort of on the same level that it was hard to figure out, well, who do you want to take at 4 or 5 or 6 or 8? And I think they did well with that pick. So he should fit in nicely, especially because shooting has to be the priority here. And, in his second year in college, he did stroke it really well from the college tree. That should translate to, some amount of competency from back there for him.
So the biggest con for me when I was looking into the draft process about Keegan Murray was how everyone talked about him being in this 99 percentile of his post game, right? And, I get that he's 6'8", 6'9", but I didn't see that really translating into post work for him to being, that was his number one scoring option, arguably in college, was being able to take advantage in the post. But I didn't see that translating over. But after watching so much film now, and even a few of your breakdowns on Mike Brown's Princeton offense and how they really flow through the game, do you actually think that his post game can translate over to the NBA level?
No, by the way, as you're talking, I figured I'd quickly look up my notes from when I looked at him in college. So he plays mostly down low, which is when I was going through it, and I wrote ugh because that's not going to translate in the NBA really, especially for him. I didn't think that his post game was that great anyway. Like just looking at it from the footwork standpoint and subtlety and creativity.
Right.
So that's an issue. But what I did notice was he can stand still and shoot it. Right, so he can get spaced out and he can wait for Sabonis or whatever to make a move and create an advantage, and then get the pass and shoot it. So that'll be something that they can plug in. But I don't know. I mean, I suppose if he was able to find some sort of a mismatch, they could get him down there for a couple touches. But that's not really what the NBA is doing this much these days anyway. So I wouldn't expect to see too much of the post game from him.
See, and I 100% agree with you, and that's why I had those concerns. But again, looking at this past offense with the Warriors, and we're gonna get into this here now. Coach Nick of BBall Breakdown. I know the show started a little bit earlier, guys. I see the messages here saying I thought you guys said 11:30. I thought I'd start the conversation off a little bit early, let you guys start falling in, be like, wow, it already started. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna give you guys a quick commercial break so I can get the sponsor out of the way for Rate Crushers, and we'll go back on the other side. Coach Nick and I are gonna break down some film on Mike Brown. So right after this 15-second commercial break. All right, guys, ratecrushers.com. If you guys are looking for mortgage, renters, car, leisure insurance, these guys have you covered, crushing their competitors up by 35%. Coach Nick of BBall Breakdown. You guys go follow him on YouTube and Twitter and all social media platforms. The guy has you covered when it comes to X's and O's. And speaking of X's and O's, let's go ahead and jump right on in to this Princeton offense here, Coach Nick. And I'm going to kind of let you take over the conversation here, but we're looking at this set, and just tell me everything that you're seeing from this Princeton set right here. And this is when Mike Brown was the head coach for those few games with the Los Angeles Lakers.
Okay, so you had, high post entry is a big one on there, and you can see, Nash is kind of controlling this. So can we jump back a little bit? Yeah, or is it a replay?
Yep.
Yeah, let's see. So basically what you'll see here is Kobe initiates with a pass to the wing, and then he cuts to the weak side. So in a triangle offense, which is what I used to coach, Kobe would go to the strong side corner and form a triangle and then run it there. The Princeton is very similar, but one of the main differences in the setup is that Kobe would go to the weak side corner instead, and then they instantly get into a reversal back to the top, and now you got your point guard, Steve Nash, operating with some space and some movement. So you can see they hit the pinch post there, and he curls back around. Lots of movement, lots of things on the right side as well that are going to occupy the defense. You don't get the exact spacing that we like to see these days, but look, he gets a drive in the middle, which is what you want to do at all times because that is what sucks the defense into help, and that's when you get the kickouts for the open threes. So when I coach offense this is 2012 or 2011 probably when they're doing this. It's ahead of the game. The idea of trying to get into the middle, draw and kick, and generate wide open threes. So that's what you're getting out of this action on the Princeton.
So when I keep seeing this play, I can see Sabonis playing that Pau Gasol role and Ron Artest being the Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray that's still sitting in that corner for the spacing and having Fox, and as I overjump here, and having Fox obviously playing the Nash role here with Kevin Huerter being maybe the Kobe. But just the passing between the two bigs, do you see this as still a very efficient offense for the Kings to use with their spacing that they have?
For sure. I mean, we saw that. I went through, I think, like 40 of Sabonis' assists for the Kings toward the end of the year. And a lot of that was all catches where you're seeing the catch there on the high post from whoever that is. Who is that? Is that Dwight?
Yeah, it's Dwight Howard. Yep, that's Dwight Howard.
Now, here's the thing. Sabonis isn't going to be a guy like Jokic. He doesn't throw passes like that. But he can make the right read and the easier read, and he gets a lot of assists off of like just jump offs off of good handoffs, where then he's a huge presence to then rub the guy off after he hands it off. And he's a little bit sneaky in there with the handoff stuff. To watch for that next year, he might go through his legs. He might dribble the ball on the other side of his body and then wrap around for the pass. Sneaky stuff that might get the defense out of position. Without question, you're going to see a ton of touches either on that elbow or a little higher above the 3-point line too for spacing. And you'll see him just picking his spots. Again, it's not going to be like no look, skip passes for the corners for threes. It's going to be the little ones, the quick short passes that he's really good at that are going to find guys like Mitchell and Fox coming around full speed and then attacking downhill.
So look, it's the second play in a row that we're seeing where Powell is getting the ball on that high elbow. Is that something that you're going to have to need a big man with spacing to be there? Because obviously Powell showed toward the latter half of his career that he can knock down that 3-point shot a little bit, more mainly at the top of the key, right? But does it need to be that high for the action to begin? Or is it just because they had Howard and Powell that you saw this, but maybe with guys like Keegan and Harrison playing that 4 spot, it would be a little bit different, and maybe you can start inside the post where maybe Dwight Howard's standing now?
Yeah, you can definitely do that as well, especially because Sabonis is a real threat to put the ball on the ground and get by you or get into the lane, get his shoulder into you, which is, by the way, the only way he likes to score, basically, is get the right shoulder into your chest and then elevate, because he's not going to elevate over you, but he's going to neutralize any jumping ability you have by getting into your body. It does hurt him sometimes. He gets out of position. He gets out of off balance, looking for contact. It doesn't come, and he misses shots, but he's been able to do it to the tune of 20 a game or whatever it is, which he should get to again this year. So, I feel like what they have now, if you put guys like, let's just imagine it's like Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, and Huerter is a bigger guard, which is nice to see. He's got some size. Monk, it was great to see him finally figure it out in LA because he really struggled in the beginning of the year, and I thought this might have been the end of the road for him, but he's figured some things out and really played well for them and ended up hitting a lot of threes too. So you got Monk, you got Huerter, you got Fox, who's not a shooter. I don't know if he's ever going to straighten out his rhythm issues. He likes to hang in the air too much. He's got a lot of power coming from the legs. He has trouble controlling. But but can you get away with Murray? Let's see, what would the 5 be then? It would be Fox, Huerter, Monk,
Barnes. So the projected starting 5, at least from the consensus that I've talked to multiple times on this show, would be Fox, Huerter, Barnes, Keegan, and Domantas Sabonis, which puts spacing everywhere, with your bench core being Davion, Monk, and Holmes.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's a good team. Again, it's bloody in the Western Conference. I don't know how they're going to, eke into the playoffs even, but at least they'll be competitive, and you'll have those games where they'll go down the wire, because there's a lot of blowouts. There's a lot of, consecutive losses last year. So you should see a more consistent team. I mean, I would be, obviously Sabonis doesn't space the floor. They try to get him beyond the arc. It's just, his 2-motion shot, I don't think is going to ever be a thing. And a lot of times he's shooting wide open shots because they're like, please shoot those. And he still doesn't hit those at a higher clip. So
He's
that
been
you hope.
working on it. He's been working on it this entire offseason.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's gonna.
Okay.
He's been doing a lot of work on shooting this entire offseason. I think it's every other day. It's a post of him just shooting, and really working on catch and shoots and things like that.
Send me over a clip. I want to check it out because I could tell pretty quickly if they've adjusted anything or if he's working on specific things that help. It's funny. I just tweeted out earlier today. This is a totally off topic, but related because it's the Lakers. Did you know that Russell Westbrook shot 39% from three over his last 12 games of the season?
I did not know that. That's actually like his best in a long time.
Yeah, and it was like 4 a game, 4.5 a game. Like
That's a lot. That's a lot for Westbrook.
Yeah, I'm actually doing a video on him right now, what he needs to do to actually be successful with LA. And I like my mouth dropped because like what I do is I do X's and O's, but shooting is my other big thing. And as I'm looking at this, and the same thing like Sabonis, my spidey sense tingles. I'm like, this guy Russ is changed his shot. He actually improved his rhythm, and so it isn't necessarily hard to do, but you got to know what you're looking for. And hopefully Sabonis has got somebody who knows that and knows how to train him to do that. So if that's the case, then yeah, he could get up to, even if he's like 33, 34%, that's good enough to provide a little bit more spacing. So without question, we're going to see a lot more of that and less of this morass in the lane where there was just too many people moving around and clogging everything up in the beginning of the year. And so you'll see, and the bottom line is, aside from what Mike Brown talked about in the very beginning, which is the early action of your offense. And by the way, when you're talking about the Princeton, you're talking about like sets, teams only run that 15 times a game, maybe out of 100 possessions, right? Where there's a timeout or there's a stop and play, they can call play. They need to flow into, and they're not running transition. They flow into offense in the half court that is organic. And certainly the Warriors have mastered that because, Steve Kerr still teaches it like the triangle in the sense that there are automatics. So if I'm here with the ball and the guy is there with the other in that spot off the ball, then I'm going and I pass it there, then I automatically move to this spot or I automatically set that screen. And so if you build your offense that way, and this is for every level, you can then get that what we call organic offense, but all 5 players are on the same page and they can operate like 5 fingers on a hand. And that was always the key for like Tex Winter in the triangle anyway. Nobody ever wanted to call plays. They wanted to let them play. And the quicker they can get into those plays and just find good shots, the better shots you're going to get. And so it's good to see that Mike Brown, without question, has mastered this concept, coaching for so long with the Warriors and Steve Kerr, that you can only hope that it translates. The one thing that was a struggle with the triangle offense when Phil Jackson and Tex Winter weren't running it was, well, Tex Winter wasn't there to help any of the other teams try and run it and never really did well. That was the one missing piece. The other assistants that tried, like Rambis and those guys, they could never capture what the guru could do when he was there. The question now is can Mike Brown capture what they were doing with Steve without having like Steve Kerr next to him on the bench?
Yeah. So during that interview that I posted in the beginning of the show, and maybe I'll play it back here in just a moment, but he also talks about his 3 staples, and his 3 staples of his offense was 1, pace, talking about whether that's in the half court or in the or running full court. The second one was space, which obviously space and pace is key in today's NBA. And the third one it's the one that you just brought up, which was the automatics. He says 0.5. 0.5 is the one where they have half a second to make the choice and you can't just sit there. And I think with that type of offensive mindset and just that early flow with a guy like De'Aaron Fox and the high IQ passing of a Sabonis at his position, I think that makes sense for a coaching style like Mike Brown.
For sure. And you want because you want De'Aaron Fox to be able to maximize his incredible talent as much as possible. So that's going to be wide open, get it in transition, get him a lot of those touches. And then I got to tell you, I didn't think I was kind of shocked when I did see him playing alongside Sabonis and letting Sabonis run the offense. That was a revelation for me for his game, which leads me to believe, maybe they don't need to trade him or anything like that. Maybe they can make this whole thing work. Whereas I wouldn't have believed it had I not just really studied it for half an hour before we came on. So there is hope that they can make it work. That said, they're going to have 20 games in the beginning of the year to really get a handle on what's happening, and then they can make a decision from that point. Because as far as I can tell, Fox should have a lot of value, and there might be ways where they could get a player back that, would just be a better fit for them, and another team would be really excited to get Fox, and then they could both be happy. I was kind of thinking the Lakers could do it for Russ, but no, but I don't think the Kings want Russ, so that wouldn't work either. But nonetheless, so we'll see. I give it give him 20 games. Let's see how Mike Brown gets them talking. He's Brown's got a good rhythm, and is one of those kind of player coaches, right? Who doesn't he's not a screamer, he's not a yeller. He did attract the Kobe stare, which was the beginning of the end for him on the bench.
Yeah.
In LA. And that makes sense. A guy like Kobe, if he has a coach who's not going to grab people by the collar and get nose to nose and make their points, then Kobe would have been, wondering what's going on. This is not really coaching. Different era. And there's a lot of ways to get through to guys. And so we'll see if Mike Brown could do it. I've seen Mike Brown in action, at a Lakers practice or two.
Yeah.
And we'll see if that's changed or not, or if he's refined the communication skills better. And everyone's going to be, probably on eggshells in a little bit, like just wondering, is this going to be the thing that turns it around? And we'll know pretty quickly.
I honestly believe that he's gonna be able to get the ears of these young players. It's, in my opinion, the best coach the Kings have had since probably Coach Michael Malone. And just by seeing the players there at his press conference, the fact that he admitted, now that the playoffs are over, that he flew to go have lunch with De'Aaron Fox and his family, that he's been talking with Rashawn Holmes, been talking with Davion, and adamantly saying, even at his press conference, that we're going to make these guys work defensively because we know that's where it's going to start, and not even necessarily talking about the offense, where we know just based on the players that they got, they're definitely going to improve. And speaking of the offense, let's go ahead and jump right back on him, because this next set here that I had queued up for us, it comes right here. I think this spacing is what we'll see a lot from the Kings, where you have a Sabonis being where Gasol is. This Jordan Hill will probably be, again, like a Murray or a Barnes. Same thing over here. I think that's is that Ron Artest? Ron Artest being there with Steve Blake being Fox. Can you walk us down this play here?
Sure. Let's see how this goes. So, okay. So a little exchange on the left side and into a flare screen for Blake, and then reversal. So actually the flow isn't even like amazing on this. They sort of had to call each other out to do it. But again, side to side action, spread the floor. Let's see that again. Let me go through. That was fast. But that's right. Great. We don't often see this. Certainly we wouldn't have seen this before Sabonis got there in Sacramento.
Right.
Where's that? Oh, is this one? All right. So hang on for 1 second. Can you pause?
Yep.
Go back to the beginning of this one, because this one's important too. And here's the question. Since Mike Brown last coached the Lakers, like the Princeton offense has become a 4-letter word. Like, nobody wants to do that, which is unfortunate. But that said, we do see Princeton. We still see triangle, by the way. There's still options out of the triangle that we see a lot of. Mm-hmm. But this is called the Chin series. And this we still see. But let's see. So what you get is a guard-to-guard pass. Kobe passes it to Blake, and then gets a backdoor, a back screen at the high post and cuts back door. And then Blake cuts off that screen. Now, if you go back one more time, go back to the beginning. What we normally see now in the NBA is the beginning is you'll see the backdoor cut by Kobe off of that screen, but then the screener, who is Bynum or Dwight maybe, Dwight would then go screen for Blake. That's what the big one is. And you'll probably see that more than anything else out of a set like this. But if you keep letting it roll, we'll see that there's an X off of Dwight on the high post. Yeah, and there's Kobe getting the feed. That's right out of the Princeton offense circa 1967, with Bill Bradley getting that shot.
With this play here, this is why I think you can see some of Keegan, because like we said at the top, Keegan doesn't necessarily hold a lot of great post-game work. Like his footwork down in the post, there's not much there, in my opinion. Same with yours when you're doing your analysis on him. He does a lot of his explosion off of the mismatch and just using that length in his wingspan to finish right there around the rim. You see how Kobe's staying wide, staying open. We saw a lot of this from Keegan already in Summer League, and just to be able to call for that ball and get right to his spot and finish right off the glass. I think his patience and his IQ brings him there. And then this was the play that we just talked about here with this type of spacing, if we wanted to go through this one more time.
Yeah, we'll go through this one again. So let's see here. We have it's a one guard front. Okay. Now go back. See what C Blake does a spin move, right? It didn't have to do a spin move, right? But the spin move is a trigger in the Princeton offense. It tells you what the option is. So we talk about automatics. So the guy, it's not Artest on the left wing. It's Hill or no? I think maybe his last name is Hill on the left.
Jordan Hill is 27, but I can't remember who number 3 was on the Lakers at that time.
It's Eubanks. No, it's not Eubanks. It's someone like that guy. You're really going back in the vaults here with this.
Right.
So as soon as Hill sees that he does a spin move on that triggers, I cut back door, and you're going to see it. So keep going a little bit farther, and you'll see Hill cut. So this is what this means. And then he gets replaced by they're looking for a post up quickly. Nothing was there. Then it just swings, and then we get a pin down. Now there was a little bit of pistol action, which you see a lot of. A pin down for Blake into a handoff. And then they ultimately get Kobe for the wide open shot. So that's all modern stuff you'd see now by the various players. You'll see the Kings. So you'll probably get some version of that for sure out of this. And, Harrison Barnes certainly is no stranger to this offense, having played in Golden State for the first 4 years of his career. I'm trying to figure out, Davion Mitchell is a guy who really impresses me. I think he could, based on his training, like Baylor is where he played, right? Homer?
Mm-hmm.
Homer. Based on how they ran their offense, he should be able to fit into that. And I think also Keegan as well. So you have some players, and then certainly Sabonis will be a natural fit for this. So you already have players that have some knowledge in this and should be able to handle it. Fox is the real key. Will he do it? Will he consistently be able to do that and not just want to slow everything down by pounding the ball on top over and over again? And there's running, you saw a lot of pick and roll for him without running anything beforehand. And that's sort of the secret, I think, that the Spurs showed us early in the 2014, 2013 before then. And then the Warriors certainly had shown that the pick and roll works a lot better when you get a little bit of movement beforehand. And then the defense is now shifted, and now you get into a pick and roll. It works a lot better.
So that offense, as you said, like we just got to see a little bit of what he likes to do. And I think the biggest thing for me with watching all of these plays as we go back to it here is no one's necessarily standing still. There's always movement somewhere, whether that's Artest giving the screen for Kobe's guy and just still creating that spacing. That's just away from the ball as well as on the ball. A lot of action happening in their own little areas here. The quick action doesn't really make too much sense on these early plays, but just the fact that, again, off-ball movement is key, and I think that's going to be big for the Kings. But let's look at, the Warriors now. We look at the Warriors, and we're seeing these types of sets, and I don't know if you remember this specific play and talking about the Warriors, but if you want to go through this here as I'll restart the clip and tell me what you see.
Well, this is their bread and butter. So when we talk about automatics, and you can see Steph actually calls it out because, they could run this without even calling it. But when they fill the low post with Wiggins, they do a split. And so this is where you'd see shooters like Herter coming around in the Curry role. And then you'd have, you have a shooter in Draymond role, if you have like Keegan Murray there, then he doesn't need to cut back door. He could flare out and be another shooter and get better spacing if both defenders go to Curry, for instance, on that cut around looking for the three. So here's another version of that where they can flip it depending on who is setting the screen, who's passing the ball to the low post. If it's a non-shooter passing the ball to low post, then if it's a non-shooter who's on the top of the key coming there, he'll set a flare screen, which we saw Draymond do for Jordan Poole, and then he gets a flare cut versus coming around toward the post looking for the shot. But all these things are just the oldest plays in basketball. They've been running this play since the 20s, and it puts a lot of pressure because you get penetration, first of all, with the defense by the low post entry. You don't need penetration doesn't happen only from dribbling, right? You can penetrate the defense by getting the ball to the low block there, and it's a lot easier than having to do a double crossover through the leg, spin move to the basket, right? That's hard to do. This is much easier to throw it there. And so you can see now that the pressure on the defense is immense. The weak side corner is kind of wide open if he wants to swing it because the guy came over so far. And the two defenders are so worried about Steph coming around on the split cut that you'll see here. Let it play real quick and then stop when he comes around. You'll see, and you can see my drawings of that. Yeah. As he comes around, they're going to be so concerned with this. Oh, I see what he did. Bridges really screwed the pooch. You can't double the post down there.
Yeah, exactly. They attacked the mismatch.
It wasn't a threat. But you can see how concerned they were with Steph there, and that opens that corner, and they get one more, and then it's a wide open shot. I can't believe they missed that one. That was wide open. And then they probably do it again. Here's the flare, I believe, right? So, okay, freeze it here. So here what you have is, you wouldn't want Jordan Poole screening for Draymond Green coming around for a three, right? Obviously, we know why. So Draymond knows this, and this is when you work on your individual drills, your three-line drills with the post passer and the two cutters. Draymond's like, no, let me set a screen. You flare away, and that way, and then I can slip backdoor. So watch what happens here. And then once you develop this after a couple of practices, this is automatic. This is easy. Poole knows he's not setting the screen; he's getting the screen. So watch this. So there's the flare screen on top, and then he's open. And look, it's like that's just practice. There's nothing to that.
Open shots. This is what I really like, and this is what we're talking about when we got to the beginning of the show. I showed the Mike Brown discussing his early offense. This is a point guard that understands the offense and knew to just look for the mismatch and set it up. And this quick trigger right here from Steph was so nice to see.
Yeah. Now let's see here. Now Steph, by the way, pause for 1 second. Steph is very unselfish. And he realizes that they have the mismatch and they're going to run a low post split. And he also realizes because he's on the weak side now, he's not going to be part of that. And he's okay with that, right? He knows there's potential for him to get the ball on this one. Mm-hmm. This could ultimately collapse defense enough where his man has to help and he'll be open. So that's what's the key. And that's what you got to convince everybody on the Kings is that if you just function in this offense, you can get the shots back. You might get opportunities if you're willing to give it up and be on the weak side and do a little bit of movement there. But then you see the same things on the low post split there. It comes around on it was like a brush screen. And then now look, they by the way, look at Steph. Was Steph wide open?
Yeah, he was wide open.
The corner on that. And again, by him doing that, it opens up the cutter for the layup there. It's really, by the way, we can go on and on about Steph and how he opens up shots so Magic Johnson got layups for his teammates by passing it to them. Layups, not just open shots, layups consistently. Well, so does Steph Curry, but not by passing it to them. By cutting, he opens up his teammates. Now, the question is, can they recreate that kind of thing with, they don't have a Steph Curry. Fox is not that guy. He's never going to command that kind of gravity. But if you get guys like Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter in that split action, that makes it very hard. When you ever saw Steph and Clay involved in the split action, forget about it. You're never going to stop that. In fact, it boggles my mind they don't run it more. But if you get Huerter and you get Monk coming together there and splitting off of that in front of a post where the ball is close to the basket, and you have maybe Sabonis in the low post, that's going to be terrific for them. And if you don't get anything out of that, Sabonis can quickly kick it back to the top for Fox, who should have plenty of room to then break the defense down and either score or get a kick out for another open shot. So they have a lot of opportunities here. It's a real question of if Mike Brown can communicate these things properly and if they're willing to buy in even a little bit. Like I've seen these practices for the Warriors where they'll get him to do like jump stop, pivot, bounce pass, jump stop, all these ridiculously rudimentary things. It's not to help them develop their skills because you won't ever see them do a jump stop, reverse pivot, bounce pass, whatever. I think it's because if you see them willing to do it in the training camp, for instance, that they're bought in. They're willing to do that. And I bring this up because Mike Brown was part of this. And so if he starts to do these things in training camp and he knows and he sees them and De'Aaron Fox leading the team because he wants to be the leader and he's doing these things with vigorous energy, then he knows that they're going to listen to him and they're going to buy into the other things they need him to do. And so you should feel good about the possibilities of at least their offense buying in. We haven't talked about the defense. Should we talk about that at all?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to transition into. So I don't have much. I don't actually have any defensive film pulled up, but I feel like with defense, I think the number one thing was effort. That's going to be the big one. Obviously, Davion being the core of the defensive effort for the Sacramento Kings. It's been something that I've preached about a lot where I feel Fox has all the tools to be a good defender. Coming out of college, people said he could be a really good on-ball defender. He closes out. His closeouts are he over closes outs, which means on a pump fake, they're easily able to just blow right past him. And that's just such a huge headache to see constantly. Sabonis not being the greatest in terms of being a help side defender positionally. I think he's actually okay, but in a pick and roll, he doesn't have the lateral quickness to step up there. But what have been your thoughts on the Kings defense and how do you think Mike Brown can improve them with just being there?
Yeah. So I went through, I kind of tried to pull apart the effect that, that Sabonis had on the defense. Where did it go? Where's my tab here? Is this it? Is this it here? Here it is. So Sabonis, when he played in those, not a ton of games for Sacramento, but there's a some there. He actually was pretty much a net zero defensively as far as on-off numbers, which is good. Like they weren't like terrible. They didn't get worse when he was on the floor. So there's something there, and he has some ideas about. He's certainly a good rebounder, and he's rugged down there and stuff like that. So I think he could be okay. The main philosophy that the Warriors adopted in their defense was no middle, and you certainly didn't see that in the Kings before, last year. And it's funny because Luke Walton should know this as well and stress it. But when you allow the players to penetrate into the middle of the defense, you're going to get screwed no matter what. You're going to give up either shots at the rim or wide open threes. So I anticipate seeing him stress no middle as much as possible to keep them out of there. A lot of times coaches might worry because you're forcing a righty to go to the right on the right side of the floor, but it's always preferable than allowing him playing him straight up, or for instance, or you don't want to, even if you're forcing him left, you can't force him left into the middle. It's a nightmare. It's death to your defense. So you'll see that, and so that should improve the defense. That alone. But again, we got to find out if they're going to get them to buy in. Like, it's one thing to get a team to buy in on your offensive stuff because you can tell them, hey, I want you to get these shots. You're going to get all these shots. That's easy to get them to buy in sometimes when you talk that way. It's the defense that's going to be really hard. I give it I don't know. I don't know what number I'd give it, likelihood that it's going to work. But at the very least, he was in charge of the defense in Golden State. Golden State was elite defensively for those years, except for when they got all those breakdown injuries a year and a half ago. So, his record is clear. There's no reason not to give him the benefit of the doubt that they'll institute some stuff that'll make him better than whatever they were. They were down at the bottom, I think, in defensive rating for a long time. 27th. So it should improve several spots up in that list.
Do you think because I feel their best defensive lineup has to include at least Davion and potentially Rashawn Holmes, but the counter to that would be the offense would be so clustered there. But looking at all of these sets and looking back on even this Warriors team, right? They were able to run with Draymond and Kevin Looney as the 4-5, and Draymond not really being that shooter. I mean, you can fight to decide who would you rather shoot a three, Sabonis or Draymond, and I could see a lot of people arguing that they would rather have Sabonis. So, I mean, do you think that that's a pairing that could work if you do Davion, Fox, let's say Barnes, Sabonis, and Holmes, and actually think of that as a good, not just defensive lineup, but offensive lineup as well?
Never say never. And I do feel like traditional bigs, two of them aside, we're seeing some success for other teams doing it. And one of the reasons why I think that, and I think Rashawn Holmes would certainly help with this, is that the best three-pointers you can take are ones off of offensive rebounds. And if that's the case, and you would like to increase the number of those kind of shots, well, you'd want to increase the number of offensive rebounds. And to do that, it would probably make sense to play two traditional bigs who are going to crash the boards hard, who don't necessarily need to be those guys who are shooting it because they're going to be kicking it out. Obviously, it helps if one of those guys is a decent shooter. And again, if Sabonis could get to 32, 33, then that works. Like if Holmes gets the rebound, then he could be out the three-point line perhaps to get that kick out for the shot. So I can totally see that working, and I don't see why anybody should be completely afraid of it. That said, it seems to me the lineups that catch my fancy the most these days are the smaller and smaller and smaller lineups. Like let Harrison Barnes play center and run out everybody else.
Wow.
But Harrison Barnes will probably be a center in another few years. I think that's where we're moving towards anyway. I mean, the dude is 6'8" or whatever. He's not weak. He's kind of strong. I think he could probably do it in the middle parts of the game, like after the starters start to come off the floor.
Right. Do you when you look at a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves and they add guys like Rudy Gobert on Karl Anthony Towns, and they say, "You say that, coach, but hold my coffee while I go grab Rudy Gobert for 5 first-round picks." What was your thoughts on a move like that and seeing how they're competing in the Western Conference?
Well, I'm going to do a video on this, so it's glad that you asked. My first instinct would just say, like, it wasn't the reason that Karl Anthony Towns was so good offensively because he was playing center. And now you're going to put him at another position where there's probably going to be a quicker person that could maybe stay in front of him better and then negate like some of the drives and then maybe make his shooting harder. So I don't know. The Rudy thing is a complicated matter for me. I'm sure he's a great teammate. He's been effective in Utah for all these years, but I have been saying they needed to break that pairing of Mitchell and Gobert up for 3 years. It was clear to me that wasn't going to work. And I don't want to rain on Rudy's parade too much, but I do feel like there's enough limitations to his game offensively that I don't know. And then also, sometimes I scratch my head defensively. I'm going to admit, if he's Defensive Player of the Year, I kind of wonder sometimes, if he really is that guy. But, and he doesn't get played off the floor in the playoffs because the minutes don't necessarily indicate that, but he just becomes less and less effective. And so I just feel like I don't see how that's really going to work. I thought that they were building something really great there without needing to do a radical shift like that. And I suppose if it's like Anthony Edwards gets to his MVP level, which we kind of think he's going to get to at some point, if he gets to MVP level next year and Cat's okay with that, then, okay, then there should be something there that would keep them competitive. But I have grave concerns, and I feel like we don't always pay attention enough to chemistry. And I think this might be an instance where that's going to come back to bite them.
Yeah, I feel with Minnesota, they looked over at Cleveland and saw the success they had with Mobley and Allen and Lauri Markkanen even playing the three at times where they said, let me see what we can do when we have a guy in Karl Anthony Towns that was the three-point champion. I believe he shot 40% from three-point range playing center. Let him be more away from the ball and still have a strong rebounder, an elite defender in Rudy Gobert, and see how that plays out. It'll be very interesting, but we'll see how that goes. Looking over the – go ahead.
There's no question that Cat needed help defensively because it's not his strong suit on the other side. But sometimes it's like if you can negate that with your offense, that could be okay. But yeah, I would say I would put it at less than 50-50 of success. But hey, I'd love to be proven wrong.
The Kings, like I said, 16 years since they've been in the playoffs. Vegas has currently had them at 31.5 wins. Coach Nick, what do you think of that number? With looking at this roster, we just went over the potential offense that we could see from Mike Brown. You broke down what you believe they're going to need to improve on defensively. Do you think that they can go over 31.5 wins this upcoming season? And do you think they have a chance at the play-in or the playoffs?
It's weird. I mean, they won 30 games last year, so they only think they're going to win a game and a half more this year. I'd be willing to say that they're going to be better than, a couple of games better than last year. They'll win more than 32 games. I think that's pretty reasonable. I would bet you they get closer to like in the 37, 38, 40-ish. I bet you they can get there.
Yeah, when I put the poll up, I said 36.5 wins for the Sacramento Kings would be the number that I would start at. But when Vegas came out and said 31.5, hey, look, they have their lights on for a reason. And if you look at the history of the Kings, it makes sense on why they would want to believe that. But I think you do look at this team and the potential that they showed toward the end of the season with that pairing of the Ox and the Fox, Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox, that you have to think that improvement is going to come on both sides of the ball. Playoffs, though, Coach, do you think that is a real thing? I believe 39 wins got the 8th seed in the Western Conference to make it in there. I feel like you're going to need 40 wins this upcoming season. The West is just completely stacked. Do you think the Kings have a legit chance of making it with their current build?
I mean, to make the play-in, they have a chance. I won't call it a legit chance. I won't call it a likely chance, but they have a chance to compete for that play-in spot. Yes, I think so. I think they have enough. But a lot of things are going to break right just to get to that, and so that's the good question. We're going to find out. I'm telling you, we'll know in 20 games what they have. It won't take long, I think, to figure this whole thing out. And I'm hoping that a guy like Davion Mitchell, capitalizes on the experience he got last year and continues to develop. I really like him. He stands out to me on both sides of the ball. And I've always liked Harrison Barnes. I mean, they have things. They only, again, the question is with like Mike Brown and his, what has he done? Now, the thing is interesting that I want to look at is the record when Sabonis got there was, I want to say 6-9. He played 15 games.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Is this it here? Wait, did Sabonis only play? How many games did he play for the Kings?
Let me pull up his stat line right now, and I can tell you. I had it written down on my phone.
Sorry, because I'm looking at this and last 15 games of the year, and he's only playing 4. Why is that? That's weird.
Here, let me go on the quick commercial break. We'll pull up the stats, and after the 15 seconds, we'll talk about it. So here's that commercial from Rate Crushers.
Yeah.
Because
This is for those people that wanted to missed out on this video as well. Give them that 40 seconds as well.
And if that's the case, your guys have to be able to understand how to play at that type of pace or that type of flow without guidance or direction from the coach during the course of the game. You know, now dead ball situations, timeouts, you can talk to your team about certain things, but they got to be able to play the game offensively within some sort of system so they all understand where they need to go and what they need to do. They need to be able to attack the team so they're not always going against a set defense. That's what flow to me means.
Coach Nick of BBall Breakdown joined us here on the Kings Court podcast, presented to you by RateCrushers.com. We were talking about Domantas Sabonis, and yes, it was a total of 15 games that he played for Sacramento last season. You were talking about him.
Yeah, and they only won 4 of those. And I'm thinking that maybe the people in Vegas were looking at that and saying, well, he didn't really have a great effect. There's a lot of reasons, and it's the end of the year, and he missed a ton of games after that. So that might be why they're trying to calculate a number of wins based on that. But again, when you change the coach and you change the roster like they did, I think that it's tough. I don't know how you're supposed to really be able to accurately predict anything until you see it. So I'm anxious. I need to see the first 10, even 10 games will give me a good indication of what you can expect.
Yeah, I think the biggest pressure more than anybody on this team is going to be De'Aaron Fox and deciding whether or not he is that guy. They brought in the best player he's had to play with in his entire career since coming to Sacramento, and now there's no excuses. Last season, he started off the season very sluggish, and they first thought about it was because he was weightlifting, and that was a thing because they took the ball out of his hands with Halliburton. They bring in Sabonis. His numbers did improve, but it was again on a losing season. Now there's no excuses. You have shooters. You have that a true all-star there next to you. Arguably the best player on the team is Sabonis, but they're building around you. And so now you got to figure out, is this a working piece? And I think it all comes on the shoulders of De'Aaron Fox in those first 20 games to decide what direction this Kings team is going in. But Coach Nick, man, I appreciate you so much for joining this show. Again, 5 years in the making. We got to do it a lot sooner than next time. But before I let you go, let the fans out there know what they can find you online and what they can be expecting from you for the rest of the summer and in the next season.
Well, this is great. I really appreciate it. I love being able to go through X's and O's and actually looking at footage. That was terrific. So thanks for having me on. And then, you can always find me, Twitter is a big one. We're at BBall Breakdown, where I'm having my conversation every day, all day. Sorry, Celtics fans, they got mad at me yesterday. But I'm doing one on Russell Westbrook, what he needs to do to get better and make the Lakers successful. And I'll probably be doing this Rudy in mini video and anything else that catches my fancy. There's lots of storylines so far. Who knows where Kevin Durant's going to go? That'll merit a video, at least one. So we'll see from there.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of people giving a little, hey, we had some people in the chat saying that Keegan Murray has great post footwork. I'm sorry, he uses a lot of length to get to his spots in the post. That doesn't mean good footwork. That just means he knows how to use his size. That's another one. And I don't think this is true, but RP, a consistent watcher of the show, shout out to him. He said, Coach Nick suggested Fox for Westbrook. I don't think he suggested. He just said that was an idea originally in the beginning, but I don't think the Kings would do that. That's not what he suggested, guys. You guys gotta listen.
That one down. I mean, listen, I feel bad for Russ. I would love to find him a place where he could go and be happier. And you're looking for a trade with the contracts and the whatever. That would be on paper a match. But I hear you. I don't think Russ is this value is high enough for anybody to want to take a chance on.
Look, just send him back to OKC and give up a pick. I don't know where else he could go that really just makes a ton of sense, but we'll see what the Lakers do. Let's end this with some Lakers-Kings beef here, since we went over Lakers film a little bit. Who has the better team right now, the Lakers or the Kings?
Ooh. I mean, man, like LeBron and AD kind of put you over the top, and when they're healthy, right? You saw even with Russ, like they can make that work if they could play together more. So I'll probably have to go with the Lakers, but they're not impressive after that. I mean, Austin Reeves is like the 5th or 6th best player right now, and I like Austin Reeves, but he's not as good as De'Aaron Fox or even like a Herter, you know what I mean? Like they have better players than that. So I think it goes, once you get past the top 2, you're in trouble. But those 2 are damn good.
Who has a better team right now, the Portland Trail Blazers or the Sacramento Kings?
Ooh. Probably I think the Kings.
Yeah, I think the Kings too. And so those are the two teams that when I look at it, those are the ones that are really competing for the play-in against the Kings and who's going to land there at the bottom. So it'll be interesting to see. You and I both say over 31.5 wins, but playoffs still a little bit in question. But I do think they have a legit chance at the play-in, which means they do have a legit chance at the playoffs. So that's going to be it for us, guys. Follow him at BBall Breakdown. That's Coach Nick's. We went over the X's and O's here on today's show. Follow at VM Center on all social media platforms. The Kings Court Podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your guys' podcasts. YouTube.com/SacKingsNation. Shout out to the sponsors, Rate Crushers, for crushing out those rates. If you guys are looking for insurance, definitely go through them. And until next time, Sacramento Kings fans, peace.